So over the years that I have been here, I think everybody knows that even though I was born in the north, I was born in Illinois at Great Lakes Naval Hospital, I was raised in the south. So even though I was born in the north, I am a southerner, whether or not Denise believes me. She argues with me all the time about that. I am a southerner, and I spent most of my time in North Carolina. I'm excited about being a southerner. I need to let you know that just this week, found a barbecue place that had Carolina barbecue. It's that mustard vinegar sauce. It was just like from Carolina. And they had collard greens that were just like the collard greens I grew up with. And the coleslaw was so close. It's the closest coleslaw I found. I was excited about it. As a southerner living in the north, and there's this place that's almost there. It's almost got it. And I tell you that because I get excited when I get to share little bits of southern culture with you, which I have done from time to time, and which I want to start this sermon with this morning. I want to start this new sermon series by teaching you a southern word and what it means in the South.
Y'all.
No, it's not y'all. We'll get that one another time. Here's the word that I want to teach you. Whooping. Okay? Whooping. Say it with me. Whooping. Now, don't say it with an ing. It's not whipping. It's not whooping. It's whooping. WHOOPIN with that little funky mark at the end of the end. There you go. Whooping. All right. Josh knows what a whooping is. He's back there. He's got it. He knows. In the South, a whooping was what you got when you were on the wrong side of something. It might be you got a whooping from your parents because you were a chucklehead and did something goofy or wrong. It might be that your football team got a whooping because they just weren't as good as the other team. But at the end of the day, in the South, if you were on the receiving end of a whooping, it meant that there was no doubt who the winner and the loser was. It meant that there was no doubt who was on the lesser side of things. A lesson was taught to you. Now, I'm sharing this word with you this morning to put in perspective what and why we're going to be doing this new sermon series, because we're going to be borrowing from the Catholic Church. And I wanted to start with this idea and this word because there are lots of people who trash talk the Catholic Church. There are lots of people who even have a hate on for the Catholic Church. I've sat in Bible studies with some of you, and you told me that when you were younger, you were just kind of taught that the Catholic Church was bad. And so I want to share with you this idea of whooping and why we're borrowing from the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not going to tell you they do everything right, because they don't. But by that same token, the Protestant Church, and that's basically any church that's not Catholic, which would be the American Baptist Church, also doesn't do everything right. Truth be told, whatever your faith tradition is, whatever your denomination, there's going to be some things that are done well and some things that are done poor. And for this sermon series, what I want you to know is that the Catholic Church pretty much puts a whooping on all other churches when it comes to prayer. When you go into a Catholic bookstore, at least half, if not more, of the books are on prayer. How to pray. How to experience prayer. What prayers should lead you to. Prayers for different times of the season. Ancient prayers to read every day. When you go into a Protestant bookstore, at least half, if not more, of the books are self-help devotionals. Now, I'm not saying the Catholic Church prays better than everyone else. Don't hear that. I'm not saying that somehow they have a stronghold and a lock and their prayers are more meaningful. What I am telling you is that they devote a significant amount of resources and time to every aspect of prayer, more so than any other church that I have encountered. They do this, and they come up with all kinds of wonderful things that maybe we don't know or we don't get to experience. And one of those things is a prayer journey known as Stations of the Cross. If you've never had an opportunity to go through the Stations of the Cross in the Catholic Church, please go. Don't let anyone come in and do it. It is a fantastic journey experience in the last moments of Christ. The Stations of the Cross are a 13 to 14 station prayer experience. And every station has prayers and thoughts and images to help the person going through the station step into the life of Jesus. It also helps them figure out what they can learn and what they can do in relation to these last days, these last moments. How do you apply that in life? And so what we're going to do from now until Easter is walk through each one of these stations ourselves. We're going to look at each station every Sunday, looking at what we can learn, how we can take these moments from the last days of Jesus and apply them to our lives, and how we share God and how we walk with God. And so the first station that we will start with today is Jesus is condemned. If you go into any Catholic church, that's the first place. That's the beginning point. Jesus is condemned. Our scripture from this morning comes from Mark 14. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. The high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent and did not answer. Again the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of God, the Blessed One?' And Jesus said, 'I am. And he will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard this blasphemy. What is your decision?' And all of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying to him, 'Prophesy.' The guards also took him over and beat him." So if you go to a Catholic church, you would find this image, Judah. Somewhere, something like this. And you would find that scripture beneath it from Mark 14. Now what you need to know is that in Mark 14, this is a court record. And this court record in Mark shows a completely illegitimate trial. There were rules and laws about what trials looked like for the tradition of the Israelites at the time. And everything about this trial recorded in Mark isn't right. Should have invalidated what was happening and going on. I don't know if you spent time looking at the actual part of the trial. I know we've read the scripture. I know we know about this, Jesus being brought in and they asked these questions. But I think sometimes we just focus in on Jesus and the questions and don't spend time with the actual trial that's happening. The first thing that's wrong is that this trial happens at night. No trials were supposed to happen at night. The early Israelites believed that shady and wrong things happened at night, that evil crept around, that lies and falsehood belonged to the night. And so trials had to happen in the light of day, where truth could be seen, where there weren't those evils and those lies running around. So that's the first thing. No trials happened at night. In verses 56 through 59, we have this scripture that tells us that no witness's testimony matched. To actually be tried and convicted of something at this time, you had to have at least 2 witnesses with corroborating testimony. And if that could not be provided, the case was to be dismissed and the accused set free. Verse 61 has the high priest asking Jesus this question, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" This question was a question the high priest was not allowed to ask, because the high priest could not ask the person on trial a question that would incriminate themselves. And also, the whole setting of a court with the Israelites has no legal standing, because as this time, Rome had taken the authority to have trials like this from the Israelite people. They didn't have the authority to do these trials and to condemn somebody to death. That was only Rome that could do it. And so as you look at the aspects of this trial, from it being held at the wrong time, to there are no witnesses, to the person leading it is asking questions that can't be asked, to the fact that they actually had no authority to do any of these things, this trial should have never happened. This trial should not have gone down. You have this entire trial that's a farce, that is illegitimate in every way possible. And here's my problem. Here's what I want to share with you this morning that I don't know that we've thought about. Why does no one speak up and call it a farce? With all these people gathered, why is there not one that says this is wrong? This isn't right. There's no one that speaks truth in the midst of lies and wrongdoing. And I want to share with you, in case you think to yourself, well, maybe they just didn't know. There were people there that knew. As we read that scripture, we have the list of people that presided. You had the high priests. You had elders. you also had scribes. Those elders were more than likely Pharisees. And the prime point of being a Pharisee was Pharisees were fastidiously addicted to the law. They had to follow every part of the law. What it meant to be a Pharisee was, this is the law that we have been given. We follow every single point because following the law puts us in right relationship with God. And so that's what Pharisees were known for. And so those Pharisees on the council that this trial is happening, they know this is wrong. They're actually going counter to what they tell everybody they should do. They're moving against every belief that they have to be a part of this trial. The scribes that were there, guess who wrote the laws down? Anybody guess? Scribes. The scribes have written these laws before, how we do trials and how we do things. They knew. You had this great crowd of people, and even if they didn't know they shouldn't do trials at night, or even if they didn't know that the high priest shouldn't ask this question, there was no doubt that they all knew that you had to have 2 witnesses. Because that's the only way that you could bring any kind of legal action against anybody, whether it was something related to a loss of financial things, or loss of farm, or something's been stolen, or someone has been killed or injured. You have to have 2 witnesses. And so I promise you, somebody in that crowd has gone through a court case and they had to have 2 witnesses. They know that. And the last person that is there, that is with these people who didn't say anything, is Peter. Peter is right there in the midst of all of this. Jesus' own top guy isn't saying, hey, wait a minute. There's things that are wrong. There are so many people there that know this isn't right, that this isn't wrong, that this is wrong, that this trial isn't real. And not one raises an issue. Not one says this isn't right. Not one is willing to proclaim truth to power. Not one speaks up for the oppressed, at this point being Jesus. Now, as we read this scripture, there's lots of reasons. I was talking this over with somebody, and somebody said, well, they're scared. This is an angry group of people. Who knows what happens if they speak up? I get that. I understand they're scared. But being scared, being worried what happens to you, does not cancel out their responsibility to the truth. Being scared of what might happen doesn't cancel out a responsibility to righteousness. So while I know they were scared, they were worried, I know what's happening. To have this many people who know what's right and wrong stand silent. That's rough. That's wrong. That's the question that I want to pose to you today. Are you willing to stand up against what's wrong? Will you proclaim truth? Even if you're the only one amongst a crowd of angry, upset people, will you stand up and proclaim truth? Will you speak for the oppressed? Now, before you answer this question, I think sometimes when a pastor asks those questions, we're all like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm into it. That's what I want to do. That's how I would do things. I want to be completely straight with you. If you are willing to do that, if you are one of those people who say, I'm going to do that thing, I'm going to stand up for the oppressed, I'm going to speak truth to power, I'm going to step in where I need to step in, it will cost you. I think too often we don't share that there's a cost to living as God's people. It might cost you a job. It might cost you standing. It might cost you a relationship. It might cost you money. It might cost you health. But it will cost. Everything about being the people of God costs. I think too often we don't want to hear that. We don't like it, or we just are ignoring it. To be the people of God costs us something in life. These are scary things that we might lose. And yet that's what the people of God are meant to do. That's who we're meant to be. That's the example that Jesus sets for us. Because as the high priest asks him this question that he doesn't have to answer, he answers it. He answers it in truth. He answers it because it will lead him to the cross. You also need to keep that in mind. I'm not sharing with you that if anybody had spoken up at any time, this trial would have stopped. I need you to understand and keep in mind as we're going through these stations, it is not the actions of the people around Jesus that put him on the cross. Jesus chose the cross. Jesus did certain actions, did certain things to put himself there. So I'm not telling you if Peter had said something, or a Pharisee or a scribe or somebody in the crowd, that the outcome would have been different. But that doesn't matter. Because it was still what should have happened. It's what faithful and righteous people do. It's what we're meant to do in seeking truth and sharing truth. Jesus answered the question in such a way that it put himself on the cross. That it was his choice. And through that choice, through that action, Jesus proclaims a truth in the midst of a great evil and wrong. It's a truth that did cost Jesus. It cost Jesus his life. It cost Jesus on the cross his respectability. It was the most humiliating way to die. But Jesus pays that cost to benefit us who are desperately in need. Jesus pays that cost so we can come back to the Father, so we can come back to being the people of God, so we can move away from all the things that tear us down and hold us down and chain us up and have freedom. The question I leave you with again, that I hope you'll contemplate as you go from this place today, is, are we willing to proclaim that truth that may cost us to benefit others who are desperately in need? That's what this first station is about. That's what this first station is showing, a Jesus who willingly accepts the cost. Not because he gets something from it, but because we do, all of humanity. And as we are Christians, and that name means little Christ, it means we follow his example. We do what Jesus does. Are we willing to do the same? Are we willing to pay that cost? Are we willing to speak truth in the midst of scary times and hard times? And I don't know what that looks like for everybody. I know some of you know people, you know things that are going on, and that might mean that you get involved in government things. It might mean you get involved in civic things. It might mean, honestly, that when you're at the grocery store and somebody is being berated for asking for food, you step in. You get them food. You comfort them. You shoo away the person that's trash talking. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I've seen it in grocery stores. Somebody standing outside who needs food, and somebody who trash talks them because they're asking for help. That might be what you do. I just want to encourage you, as the people of God, as we talk about this first station, as we move in through this Easter season, look for opportunities to speak truth. Be willing to do it, but also be willing to pay the cost. As we move into our song of response, as Lauren comes up to lead us in this song, the song is As the Deer. It's a fantastic song. It talks about as the deer pants for the water, we pant for God in our lives. We need to be panting for all the aspects of God in our lives, not just the things that give us the warm fuzzies, but the hardships as well, the things that come in from being servants, of following the example that's set for us. And so I hope this morning as we sing this song of response, that it's a real response that you're giving. As you sing those words of, as the deer pants for the water, my soul longs after you. I hope that's real for you. And I hope it leads you to take the action that God would lead you to do. Let all who are able stand and sing.